Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to First Cut. This is our review of Iron Claw. I'm here with RB3 and Sabrina. We're here to break down the new A24 movie that has been sweeping the nation. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this film, especially you two, because I know you two might have different perspective than everyone else. So I want to start with you, Sabrina, because I don't know your connection with wrestling, and I know my connection with wrestling. So I'm curious to hear, going into this movie and then coming out of it, what did you think of this film?
Definitely. When I was really little, I watched wrestling for a short period of time. My sister and I got into a fight when we were on vacation. Then my parents banned WWE. So no Friday Night SmackDown, no Monday Night Raw. We were really little, so no damage was done. Just we're all good. But yeah, I knew nothing about the story. Besides that short stint when I was a kid, I have never kept up with wrestling. I'm not necessarily a fan. And I really appreciated in this film, because going into it with no knowledge of what is about to play out, I did appreciate the subtle breakdown of kind of the wrestling industry. And, I feel like that made it very easy to follow. Of course, it's not the focus of the film. We don't even see like major moments like Harry winning the title. But this story was absolutely bonkers. And just the fact that this is real and the true story, they had to tone it down for this film. I'm sitting here crying, going, there's no way this happened in real life. There's no way, just over and over. And yeah, there's another brother that wasn't mentioned, another tragedy, because it wouldn't even feel realistic when you're watching this film that so much tragedy was surrounding this family. The way they presented it, I thought was absolutely beautiful. I enjoyed this film so much more than I thought I was going to, because I thought it was going to be more of like wrestling family type of thing, and I did not realize the story that was the actual undertone of it.
Yeah. RB3, what do you take away from this film?
Oh yeah, I mean for me, like with wrestling, like my grandma used to watch wrestling all the time, like growing up. So like I always watch it with my grandma or with my great grandma, and she'd just be like watching all the mugs, like so early 2000s, like to 2008 and stuff. Like I probably had a pretty good familiar with. And I never did it because like yeah, my actual mom was like paranoid that I would like get my neck snapped and like some wrestling move or something. So I never like did wrestling, but I always like I watched it for enjoyment. I never really followed the storylines either, but I always consumed it. But yeah, and then but seeing this movie though, I didn't know anything about the Von Erich family. I didn't know that they had a whole dynasty. And then because this movie reaches back to pre WWF. Like I was on WWE time when I was growing up. This is like pre WWF, which was like before WWE. So I was like, dang. So this is going back way before I was even born. Before pretty much like when my mom was like born or like a kid or something like that. So I don't know anything about this story, but I was fascinated because grew up on High School Musical just like the rest of us did. So Zac Efron, it can do no wrong in my eyes, and Jeremy Allen White from The Bear, I'm a big fan of him as well. Also the homie who plays the father, I forget the actor's name off the top of my head, but he's also in Mindhunter, one of my favorite shows that Netflix has ever done. So I was very, very hyped on the movie just based on the cast and seeing the actual film itself. Seeing my boy from The Bear look like yoked out of nowhere, like mad jacked. I'm like, yo, did he like never take off his shirt in The Bear, or has he always been like this? And then I'm kind of like, man, this don't even look natural. And then it kind of plays into the character though, because he's actually mad into steroids, like the character is. So I'm like, okay, this kind of makes sense too. But yeah, the whole story in and of itself was amazing. I was moved. I was heartbroken. Just like Sabrina said, I was crying. I was wrenched watching it. And I was heavily impacted by it. And I think it is an amazing, inspiring story that was definitely worthy to be told. For me, historical accuracy means a lot to me in a movie, like a lot. Because to me, like the movie, for a lot of people, is going to be the text, like is going to be the way that people remember a historical event or a moment or a person's life. So, I do admire the choice that they had to make and like toning it down and, taking that brother out and stuff like that. But upon reading it like the next morning, because had a whole night of being wrecked about this film, and then can read about it till like the next morning. And the next morning, I'm reading about it. I'm like, dang, there was another brother for real. Like, so I don't know. I definitely like. I appreciate that they were sensitive about the audience and their reaction to it. But to me, it gets just a little bit of points off because it just wasn't the most like historically accurate. Which is, again, I understand why they had to do it, but it's the same thing. That's my same criticism of like Black Klansman too. Like, I love Black Klansman all the way up until the point that they like start making stuff up, and particularly like when there's like a whole bomb that's like going off in front of somebody's house, like whole car bombing situation. Great movie up until that point, but just when it hits that like fictional area, I'm like, I don't know. But that's just me.
Yeah, that's actually usually why I don't love Tarantino films. I know
Mm-hmm.
he does it in
Mm-hmm.
obviously a very different way. He's getting a completely different point across.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm with you on I wish the other brother was included, but I
Mm-hmm.
understand why they didn't do it
Yeah.
from like a narrative standpoint
Yeah.
because even the way it played in this film was just insane. Like I could not believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a very emotionally impactful movie that I didn't expect going in. I think I'm with you, Sabrina. I went in thinking it was going to be just like, oh, it's brothers in wrestling and they're how do they rise up in the industry and that kind of stuff. I didn't expect it to be like death after death after death and tragedy after tragedy. And it definitely takes you in for a loop, especially towards the third act of the film, where you experience the most tragedy of them all, like back to back to back, versus the first two acts, which is more about setup in the wrestling family and stuff like that, and getting to know them. But it definitely is very emotionally impactful. For me personally, I asked the wrestling question because I was that kid. I did grow up with wrestling. I wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
a wrestler. I bought all the
Hey.
DVDs, all the video games. I was considered very hardcore wrestling fan, so I knew a lot about wrestling. But again, I'm with you RB3 as well because this is way before my time. Um, way back. This is I think it starts out 1978 and 79,
Mm-hmm.
which is again way before my time.
Mm-hmm.
So this story I didn't know anything about. So going in, I was very interested in hearing what their perspective was, and it very much is a um, I don't want to say cautionary tale, but almost kind of a cautionary tale when it comes to the obsession of the father and this obsession with breaking the curse and what that leads to
Mm-hmm.
when you're trying to counteract that kind of pain with, you know, abuse and
Yeah.
obsession with something that's not going to get you what you want. So it's very interesting to kind of echo what you said too, RB3, just because I'm jumping off your point as well. It's definitely roids.
Yeah.
There's no way it's not roids. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No
That's
natty.
not natural. I don't
Yeah.
give. I don't. You could tell me a million workout routines. I don't give a crap. Y'all, Zac Efron, power to you, man. I'm sure you do it in a medical manner.
No, Zac
Uh,
Efron. He's always been ripped though. Zac Efron's always been
Not
Yeah,
like
ripped.
those
that. Not
ginormous.
like that. No,
I
he
think
looks
now he's just
disturbingly
grown.
inflated.
I think now he's just grown. First of all, I'm gonna stand up for my man
No, he's
every
pumping
day,
in
no matter
those,
what.
sticking in his butt.
I think I think that I want to echo what both of you guys said going into it because obviously I kind of had like my little overview, but Jeremy Allen White, Zac Efron, I think these are insane performances we haven't seen from them ever. Of course, grew up on High School Musical, love all of those films so much. And it's also really cool to see Zac Efron just back. I know he's
Mm,
had films that have come out, but he hasn't gotten like praise or a lot of attention necessarily. And with this one, it's definitely very deserved. I think I would love to see him sneak into Best Actor Oscar. I know we're going to talk about that more in the future, but I'd love to see that. Jeremy Allen White is also having an incredible year along with his co-star Io because
mhm,
from The Bear to this, the amount of emotional weight that these two have, and like you said, Andres, when you're talking about these films where people are striving for something and they're putting it's kind of like a black swan type of moment, you know, they're putting so much of their own life on the line, they're putting all their relationships, their dad is manipulating them since they were kids. It's kind of something that you can never get past, you know. He's like, if you're strong, the curse can't get to you, whoever's at the
mhm,
top. He's consistently telling them right off the start, he's like, this is my order of how much I love you guys, it can change at any time. And so I can't imagine seeing that environment. It's crazy. It's bonkers. And I understand why Zac Efron kind of feels as not the oldest because their older brother had passed away very, very young. As the next oldest, he had had that weight on his shoulders forever. It seems like he was the one that was always trying to keep the family together. He even, to get into spoilers, because I feel like we kind of have to for this film, when Carrie is going through what he's going through, and he has to tell his dad, he has to step up to his dad and be like, hey, you need to take care of him, keep an eye on him for a second. I'm going to be there any moment, but just for this short amount of time, please do this one thing. And he still wasn't able to do it. And you just see all of that pain and trauma and all of that weight on Zac Efron's expression throughout the entire film. I think that is definitely the thing that affected me so much throughout this film. Along with the tragedies, it's Zac Efron's performance and how we are watching him kind of just go through all of these events.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot there with the performances. I really do feel like it's an interesting bunch of characters that are within the brothers and that are being expressed obviously through different personalities and through different honestly kind of like wrestling tropes, right? Where you have the physicality in the ring, you have the beast on the mic, which is an actual thing in wrestling when you're really good
Yeah.
at being on the mic, or when you have the athlete like Carrie is supposed to represent. All this kind of avenues that you're being expressed through this family is really interesting, and it's an interesting dynamic that actually played off in real life with the Von Erichs, which is really cool to see because you get to experience the real life wrestling situations like um, Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair, which was a big deal in that era and in that avenue. I can't lie. I know I haven't talked to a lot of wrestling fans who have seen this movie, but I know that Ric Flair is gonna bug people.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say,
Really?
yeah, well, yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I don't
Everyone
know.
knows Ric Flair. Everyone
Yeah.
has seen Ric Flair. Everyone has seen promos of Rick. And
Mm.
I was like, anyone can criticize that performance, and they're gonna.
Yeah, that's the one thing. Like, I don't even know about wrestling. I never even really watched a Ric Flair wrestling match, but I knew that guy was bad. Like, I knew that actor was like not doing it, because he was just not selling it at all.
I was
Um,
like, oh.
but then, you know what though? Like, I also get it because through the Von Erich's eyes, he's not supposed to be some kind of charismatic, like super lovable guy. They're kind of supposed to see him as annoying, and since it's their POV, that's probably how they saw him. But then, for me though, I will also say too, in terms of the wrestling POV, I love that you mentioned Black Swan, Sabrina, because I do feel like this was like a combination of two Darren Aronofsky movies, one being Black Swan and the POV of an athlete like going through that psychological torture, but the other one being the wrestler, which came right before, which is like another like depressing kind of look at like what the wrestling lifestyle entails, right? Like the kind of do or die mentality of like, yeah, you could step into this ring and entertain people, but you could also like die at any moment too. And it's just kind of grim seeing the youngest brother of the bunch, who was I believe his name was Chris, who was
Yeah.
not even trying to be a wrestler to begin with. Like he was trying to
Yeah.
be a drummer and was on a path to being a musician. But then his father pressured him to be in wrestling to like join their team. Is just like, bro, that's heartbreaking. And to see him getting that injury like that and then slipping into that coma during surgery, it's like everything that can go wrong went wrong, and it's just heartbreaking. It was just heartbreaking.
And then, yeah, I mean, like going off of what you said, like the fact that Jeremy Allen White's character Carrie wins the title, and then that same night, a tragedy happens to him. And it's like this curse is like the burden of the weight of their father putting this onto them. Because it's also that thing of like when you talk about something so much, it's going to happen. When you talk about the fact that your family has a curse, there's no way it's not going to manifest itself because you're so worried about it. You're doing anything you can to stop it. But they're pushing themselves, and that's why all of these happen. It's like all of these could have been prevented, like you mentioned with the youngest brother coming into the ring. He could have just not, but the way their dad spoke to them all throughout their lives, he was pushed to do that. Yeah, and even like the sadness and the tragedy, it never feels gratuitous at all. I think it still, well, it's based on true story, so of course, but it still feels like extremely raw and authentic to each of the characters and how they deal with it on an individual level. You know, we're in Zac Efron's character's POV, but at the same time, we see everybody around them and how they're crumbling. And I think that the mother, I believe she's played by Maura Turney. I think we see that because she had never stepped up to protect her children. And I feel like we see her demeanor definitely crumble as each one is happening. And it's almost like, how do you even manage to deal with this fallout?
Yeah, we see that scene. She couldn't even put on the dress. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a devastating story. It's almost unbelievable when you're watching it. Again, unbelievable when you don't even know that it's going to happen. At least I didn't know, because again, I didn't know their story until afterwards. I had to read up on it and then watch the little mini documentary on it. It definitely brings a lot of interesting stuff to the conversation about obsession, about attitude, about a family line of business, right? Where you have to kind of take on that responsibility. I think the scene where the dad walks out into the field and hugs Carrie and tells him, "Hey, I want you to get into wrestling, son. Like, now's the time." And then he celebrates with his brothers afterwards. Is a very interesting scene because it almost feels like unbelievable, right? It almost feels like you're in the ring and they're shooting a promo as far as how they're shooting it and how they're acting, where this is real life for them. This isn't just, they're performing. No, this is like real. It's like, I want you to get in the ring and win. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to get in the ring. Like, they don't even talk about wrestling as if it's an actual performance or a show. They talk about it as if it's real life, because to them, it is real life. And that's the real job in their career. And I know Zac Efron's character, Kevin, explains it in the movie where he says it's still a performance-based job where you're still basing it off of performance. But at the same time, you can still get hurt and you can still get injured, obviously, as we see throughout the movie and as we see in real life, where a lot of wrestlers experience physical pain and physical issues because of their time in the ring and because the ring is unforgiving in every avenue and every aspect. So, yeah, it's very realistic in that way. Why do you feel, I guess the last question I have for you guys, because we talked about the cast and the performances, is why do you guys feel this movie is resonating with so many people across the nation?
I honestly think from start to finish, the journey that it takes you on as a cautionary tale, I feel like a lot of the times, especially in today's day and age, I've just seen it with a lot of my peers. I feel like we're constantly striving and pushing ourselves to achieve stuff that sometimes might not necessarily be super realistic or even super healthy. And I also think the ending, the way this film closes out on this kind of uplifting note, which I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, the I used to be a brother scene, him having his family, the family he never got to have, him breaking the actual curse, which was a generational curse of trauma that his father placed onto them, and him deciding to move forward and not do that anymore, not put that upon his kids or his family, I think is cathartic for a lot of people. I think seeing something like that play out on screen is really important because, again, cautionary tale, and Zac Efron, his delivery to his children and his children saying, like, we'll be your brothers now. I think all of these little moments just resonate with people because there's pieces, although our own lives might not be as tragic as this one, because this is definitely a lot. There's bits and pieces of this that you can apply to your own life.
Yeah. What about you, RB3?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's just like you said, Sabrina, it's the fact that everybody can resonate to that pressure, especially like familiar pressure, when it comes to career and professionalism and things like that. I also think, the screenplay from Sean Durkin, I believe his name, who also directed the film. I believe the screenplay really gives a lot of life to each of the characters without making it seem like a shallow, like, tragedy porn kind of situation. Like, I think that scene where they're all at the wedding together and they're doing like the line dancing, and obviously Zac Efron is cutting it up better than everybody else because he got them dancing feet on them. They make sure to include enough heartwarming moments or for every person. Like I said, we see Chris at that like college party, like jamming it up. Like, we see the human side to all of these people, and it's not some sort of exploitive, trashy thing. Like, I think with one of the characters, like or the first brother who dies, like he dies in that hotel room in Tokyo, and
Yeah.
we don't see that happen. It just kind of happens on the phone call off screen. I believe, like, in reading the fact versus fiction part of it, a lot of people in the wrestling world at least think like that brother died of like overdosing, like just drug overdose. But in the movie, they don't even try to allude to that. They just say it was like a rupture, spleen or something like that. So they were very respectful and like not trying to trash these gentlemen for their life decisions or what they did or trying to put that blame on themselves. It just kind of made it seem like it was very earnest in how they approached, the lives of these people. So I thought that was really good, really well done.
Yeah, I believe it was David. It was in Japan. I believe the Japanese coroners are the ones who said it was gastrointestinal rupture, I believe is what it was. So that's what they took it as. But again, like you said, RB3, there was a rumor that it was an overdose just because there's been so many in wrestling. That's how Eddie died, to be honest. That's exactly how he died in the toilet, in the bathroom of an overdose. It's heartbreaking, obviously. I believe a lot of wrestlers have died of overdoses over the past 10 years, to be honest. I know, again, you guys probably don't keep up too much with it, but there's been quite a few marquee names who have come out with that exact same diagnosis as far as being killed on overdose.
It's like they show those mental and physical repercussions after this. All of
Yeah.
yourself that you're putting into it. It's not so crazy to think that that's how some people might be like numbing their pain. So I feel like that's why, yeah.
And I feel like the way they handle suicide as well, and I know that's a very difficult topic. It's a word that's even muted out of videos nowadays because it's such a difficult topic. But I do feel like the film handles it in a very truthful way. I like the heaven scene. I know a lot of people maybe not like that. But I think that speaks to a lot of things. Personally, obviously, it speaks to them being religious, which is fine, but it also speaks to the idea of the way their religion views suicide. I know that I don't know if you guys grew up in the church as much as I did, but it's so taboo to the point that they don't even consider you would go to heaven if you did kill yourself. That's like a big thing in the church for a lot of people and for a lot of religious people. So the fact that they chose to show the first person who go to heaven be Carrie after he does shoot himself, to me was a very powerful statement that they were making in the movie, and it was very emotional for anyone who's ever experienced just any kind of connection to that aspect of murder, which is suicide. So it's a very difficult topic for a lot of people. So I'm glad that they chose to do it that way because I feel like it makes the biggest statement of religion happens to be the most flipped, I guess, if you can look at it that way, where they're saying, hey, this one thing you consider to be a sin, and yet in reality, he did get to experience that joy in the end, in his own happy place. So I appreciated that.
I love that layer. That's why I love just talking to you guys about films because we can add so many different perspectives. That layer to it because that scene already broke me and had me crumbled up into pieces. But adding that as well, yeah, that is a beautiful, beautiful touch.
Yeah. Any final thoughts you guys have on Iron Claw?
Again.
Nah. I'm sorry.
I guess my final thought would be I would love to see an Eddie story. I feel like that's one of the most visceral moments I've ever experienced in my life. As a kid, I believe I was 11 or 10 or 11 years old when Eddie died. For anyone who doesn't know, Eddie Guerrero, who was a major Mexican-American wrestler, like one of the biggest names in WWE. I believe when he died, he just won the World Heavyweight Championship 2 years or 3 years before, which was at WrestleMania 20. At WrestleMania 20, he won the WWE Championship, and then 3 years later, he died. Very major tragedy, but Eddie was a typical border Mexican American dude who really did mean a lot to Latinos, like a lot, especially Latinos growing up in America. He was from El Paso, which is where I was from as well. So I would love to see that story. And I know Chavo has talked about it. Chavo does all the stunt performance for the films, for any wrestling film you probably watched. He did Glow. He did this one. He did quite a few others. But I would love to see an Eddie movie. I just feel like it would mean a lot and it would be a good opportunity to have more Latino talent behind the camera and in front of the camera. So yeah, that's my final thought. So
Yeah.
uh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, honestly, just another shout out to all the performances. I know we didn't mention him by name, but Harris Dickinson as well as David. I think that as the first, as again, somebody coming into the story without knowing anything and seeing this vibrant, out of all, compared to the rest of his brothers, he is just a very vibrant, lively character. And that's why he was kind of like the face, the voice, on the mic. And then to have him taken out so tragically, going from the last shot we see of him at the wedding to what transpires. And again, I do want to say that this film does not feel gratuitous in any way, because a lot of these tragedies they're not explicitly shown in the film.
Mhm.
A lot of them are mentioned, a lot of the weight is felt, but we don't really see this play out. So I thought that was also such an interesting choice for this film, and Harris Dickinson did incredible.
Hey, that's the dude
Yeah.
who's in Triangle of Sadness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was good too. He was good too.
He's great. I loved his, like you said, everything you said is spot on, Sabrina. It's just him being the first one out just breaks your heart, because it's so sudden and it's so like you
Shocking.
just saw him kill it on the mic and you're just like, yo, this guy's a badass. I love him. And then the next scene he's dead and it's like you're just so shocked by it, because you don't expect it to be him. So yeah, a really good performance in a short amount of time for sure. So either way, guys, those were our thoughts on Iron Claw. Let us know what you guys thought in the comments down below. You can follow me at Squad Leader Ace, RB3.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3.
You can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Sabrina on Film, and Instagram at Sabrina X Monica.
You can follow me, you can follow us at First Cut right here on this channel. Make sure you subscribe, and First Cut TMO. But either way, guys, for the First Cut crew, we're going to be peacing out. So peace, dudes.
It's either me or you. It's either me or you. You do the